Hello, and welcome to Canyon PD Solutions to Go. I'm excited to share this time with you discussing how to help students discover their why in the math classroom. I will be sharing a variety of ways to make math come alive. The title of this session is Helping Students Discover Their Why in the Mathematics Classroom, Math in the Real World. I would like to start by sharing this quote to set the stage for our time together. So often we spend all of our instructional time focused on teaching formulas and equations that we forget to engage students in authentic learning activities and experiences to help them form a deep understanding. This leads to a lack of real connections between math and their everyday life. The quote states, "Mathematics is not about numbers, equations, computations, or algorithms. It is about understanding." And this quote is by William Thurston, an American mathematician. We all know that learning numbers and equations and how to compute different formulas is important. However, we cannot compare it to how important it is to understand how these procedures are used in our real life. And that's the piece that is sometimes missing in the classroom. During our session, we will reflect on the impact and importance of implementing hands-on math activities in the classroom. We will then examine ways to connect mathematics learning to the real world. And last but not least, we will identify strategies and activities that support critical thinking. As we navigate through our time together, I want you to consider, what will you take away? We all know that if we don't implement the things we learn in a timely manner, we're likely to forget them. So as we go through our information today, please take time to determine what can you utilize in your classroom immediately. So let's start off by looking at the purpose of creating authentic learning experiences. Well, first of all, the big picture. We need to make math meaningful to all students. So many students sit in math class thinking, when am I ever going to use this? When they are not provided with an answer, they come to their own conclusions. More often than not, they determine that they are never going to use what is being taught in their everyday life and then decide that they can safely become unengaged. There is some great news though. Given ample opportunities to engage in authentic, real-world math activities and projects can change their view on the importance of math completely. Let's consider the impact of authentic learning experiences. These experiences will have a lasting impact on your students and future generations. In order to create these authentic learning experiences in the classroom, we need to consider three key points. First of all, are we making sure that we are focusing on the majority of students rather than the minority? Are we making math accessible and enjoyable for all children? Have we fallen into some of those stereotypes, like boys tend to be better at math? Or maybe we bring in some of our own misconceptions, such as, I wasn't really good at math and most people don't like math, so, I'll do my best. Whether we realize it or not, those misconceptions drive the way you teach math in the classroom and how enjoyable and accessible you make it for all children. So let's change that thought process around and realize that there are no limits. All students can be successful. The next key point we want to consider is relevance. As I mentioned briefly before, we often spend a lot of time with the memorization of procedures, of equations, formulas, which, yes, is needed for a variety of purposes. However, we want to think about the big picture. We want to focus on that problem solving. Are our students able to utilize the procedures and formulas and equations they've learned to solve real-world problems? Because if we don't make that connection for them, math is going to go no further the printed page right in front of them. Our goal is for students to understand the relevance of learning to be a problem solver. And last but not least, our third key point. Are we offering increased opportunities for students to use critical thinking? Are we providing a conceptual understanding or ways for them to build their own conceptual understanding? Are they engaged in hands-on learning that helps them make real-world connections? So once again, in order to make a true impact, we need to provide these authentic learning experiences. So important to remember that teachers are tasked with fostering that excitement and providing real-life applications. Are you coming to class seeming equally excited about a math lesson that you're sharing as you were for an ELA or a social studies lesson that you were sharing? Once again, I also want to go back to our own perceptions of math and how we interacted with math as a student. If we did not have a great experience, how are you going to change that? How are you going to change your viewpoint? Yes, it might take a little time for you to go in and to study the concepts and figure out ways to teach them that are more applicable and to reach all of your students. But by doing that, that is also going to foster excitement in you. And when you enter the classroom, that is going to shine through. It is so important that you're fostering excitement and providing those real life applications. So here's our goal. Our goal is to provide opportunities for students to master basic math skills and concepts while simultaneously identifying the value of their learning beyond the classroom doors. You are tasked with helping them determine their why. Why is math so important? And how is it applicable in their everyday lives? One other thing we need to consider is that we need to share that mathematics is a universal language. Math is a vehicle that not only provides them with skills to determine calculations, but it also promotes problem solving, communication, logical reasoning, and supports building relationships. These are things that can be utilized in their everyday lives and across the curriculum. Even many of our second language learners find success in math. This is an area where we can find those similarities and make everybody feel like they are a part of something bigger. So, the part that everybody usually is wondering about, how do you implement these authentic learning experiences? Let's take a look at a few best practices and other things to consider. First of all, consider relevant, naturally occurring examples in your student's environment. Why not start where we already have examples all around us? You're going to find meaningful contexts. Are these things age appropriate, developmentally appropriate? Are you providing examples that take into account student interests? Maybe their various experiences at school, within their family, or their community. In addition, you need to take time to dispel myths. Even our youngest students might come in believing some of these things. We need to dispel the myth that math is a Western invention. Contributions by females, minorities, and other cultures in the field of math need to be infused throughout our lessons. We need to set high expectations for each child, and he or she needs to be encouraged to work and learn together in cooperative groups. We need to make sure that our students understand that there's not one particular population that can do math. Everybody is capable of being successful. Another best practice, which we utilize in all subject areas, is activating prior knowledge. How are we helping students identify where they're currently using math in their everyday lives? You can relate the targeted math concept or skill to a meaningful context. For example, maybe you're talking about percentages. That might be a great time to talk about receipts and how perhaps you got a discount at the store. You might share that with students and say, wow, look at this, my friends. I got 20% off the actual price of this item. How do you think I could calculate that to make sure that they gave me the correct discount? And so on and so forth. So find ways to activate that prior knowledge before you even start a lesson, and then continue to bring up these ideas and suggestions throughout the school day and throughout the entire unit, and as you even move on to new concepts. Of course, model, model, model. You need to explicitly model these concepts and skills within an authentic context. What I just shared with you would be one great example, sharing how you might calculate a discount at a store. Maybe when you're talking about percentages or decimals, you're talking about how you determine a tip when you're at a restaurant. These don't have to be things that you're researching or looking up or creating handouts for. Look for things that are already all around you, that are all around your students in their everyday lives. Are we offering our students opportunities to apply these concepts and skills in an authentic context? So for example, maybe you're focusing on fractions. When you're focusing on fractions, what do you have in your environment that you might use as an example? One thing that comes to mind is the bulletin board. We know our classrooms have bulletin boards. Perhaps you share with your students that you are going to be redoing the bulletin board, and you need to know exactly how much paper you need to cover it, and you need to figure out how much border you're going to need to put around the edges. One of the problems you have is that the border pieces come in one size, and you don't think that you're going to be able to use a full sheet to finish the bulletin board. You're going to ask them how to determine what size you're going to need to cut that last piece of border to in order to make it fit. As you can see, a real life example where they're going to utilize fractions in order to come up with the right calculation. We've gone over some best practices. Think about what I've already shared. What was an aha moment for you? What is something you can try right away? Next, we are going to look at some example lessons and activities. We want to think back to those naturally occurring examples that I mentioned earlier. Here's one example. We often take a lunch count on a daily basis. Yes, that can be a pretty simplistic thing. Kiddos raise their hand, you count, but then you might have that one or two who say, oh, I changed my mind. I'm not going to buy lunch today. I forgot my mom gave me lunch. Okay, friends, so I had 10 who are buying lunch, but 2 said they're not going to buy lunch after all. How many are still buying lunch? Really simple example, but we can go much deeper. Maybe we have a couple of friends, a group, who is graphing the number of students who are purchasing lunch on a daily basis. Then we're going to go back as a class and look for trends. Ooh, I noticed that more students always buy lunch on Wednesdays. Why do you think that is? Because it's pizza day. We can look at trends, we can start to find averages, and then of course we can move into percentages. What day of the week has the highest percentage of students who buy lunch? What month has the highest percentage or the lowest percentage? So the options are really endless. We've already touched on shopping and how that can be a very natural thing to talk about, from adding up the total of purchases to finding percentages off, maybe to graphing spending throughout a month or throughout the months of the year. So think about the ways that you can incorporate those examples in your daily math lessons as well as throughout the day. This is one of my favorites. I have a son who is very into electronics, and kids are very concerned about how much time they're going to get to spend on their electronics. With that being said, how about we help them understand how algebra can be used? If they're allowed to use their electronics 4 days a week for a total of 18 hours, they want to use them an equal amount of hours each day. How can they do that? Here we can help them realize that they can come up with a simple algebraic equation. 4 times the number of hours equals 18, which means I'm going to be solving for how many hours can I use each day. Think about ways that you can share with them how these skills that they're learning in math class can be used for very practical reasons. Once again, ponder, are you doing some of these things already? Maybe you are doing some of these things, but you're not explicitly pointing out the value to your students. Maybe that's all you need to do to make it hit home. Now we come to some of my favorite examples. As a classroom teacher, I loved implementing problems of the week. They were fun for the students, they were wonderful learning experiences, and they allowed learning about a single topic to take place over the entire week. What I want to focus on here and point out is that these problems of the week aren't just about the calculations, they're about the focus on the process. Students understanding that we don't have to solve a large problem in one day. we can take it step by step, also focusing on how they go through this process, not just on the fact that they get the correct answer at the end. The process is equally as important as the product. This first example, I'm just showing you a snippet of the document that you have in handouts, is a problem of the week that focuses on leaving the lights on. It asks them to think about whether or not their parents or their guardians complain about people leaving the lights on when they're not in rooms. This can be completed through the course of a week where they're going to find different answers. First, they're going to focus on the different light bulbs in the house and how many hours each of those are used and how much that might end up costing. Then they're going to look at how each type of bulb costs a different amount of money to run, and so on and so forth. Last but not least, they're going to be asked to reflect on this experience. And not only did they get the answer correct, but what did this process feel like? Once again, it is about the process, not just the product. Some of you might be looking at this and thinking, oh, this would be too difficult for my third graders to do on their own. And that's okay. These problems can be solved whole group, whole class, where you work through them piece by piece together. You might get started by showing them how to do the computations, and then they could work in small groups to figure out different pieces of this problem of the week puzzle. My next example is who's coming to dinner. This is one that I truthfully utilize on a daily or weekly basis. Maybe not for this large of a group, but I have a pretty big family. So this one, they're being asked to consider the situation where they have a recipe that they want to share with some people coming to their party, but they know that their recipe only creates enough servings for 6 people. They're going to work through this problem, identifying how they're going to adjust their recipe to feed 60 people. It's not going to just be simple multiplication. They're going to come up with a scale up factor, which can be utilized in a variety of situations, not just for doubling, tripling, or quadrupling a recipe. I wanted to share that some of these problems also have a stretch your thinking at the end. So even if you've walked through this with them, maybe the next week at home, they work with grown-ups to stretch their thinking and solve the same problem, but for a larger group of people. Last but not least, the truth about trash. This one is so fun. This one amazes students as they work through the problem and identify how much space our garbage takes up on a weekly, monthly, yearly basis. So in this one, they're going to do some surveying of individuals, 10 families. Now, once again, if you were doing it together, maybe you have the kids all come in and bring the survey information just from their family. And then they're going to spend time figuring out how much trash is produced annually by the average family. It's a lot of fun. And once again, here's another example of stretch your thinking. Are you currently utilizing problems of the week in the classroom? Is this something that you could do? You can find lots of examples out there. These are just ones that I've created for you. Whether you're working on addition or subtraction or fractions or decimals, there are problems of the week out there that are going to correlate perfectly. But what I like about these is it's a review of all skills. Although you might be focusing more on multiplying or dividing, it also incorporates other skills that have been learned throughout the year. Think about it. How can you utilize these in your classroom? Now that we've looked at some examples and some best practices, I want you to understand that you have the power to make a difference. You can help students see the value of math in their everyday living. You can help students construct that rationale for why he or she needs math. Because we all know when we truly understand why something is important to us specifically, we become more engaged and more apt to put forth our best effort. Many teachers express their concern about not having enough time to teach one more thing. There needs to be a shift in thinking. Instead, teachers need to understand that they cannot teach math concepts effectively without embedding real-world examples and activities into their lessons. In fact, many of these activities will actually allow teachers to cover a variety of different subject area standards in one lesson. For example, the truth about trash would be a perfect segue into a persuasive writing lesson, or even spark ideas for an upcoming problem-based learning unit. Math is more than a book. Every child should have the opportunity to see him or herself as a mathematician. capable of problem solving and success in math. Working independently in different roles and then collectively to apply math helps students understand why math is important and how their learning can be applied in the world around them. These opportunities will help dispel the myths mentioned earlier in this session. All students, regardless of race, gender, or culture, will feel empowered to take on any math challenge that comes their way. So as we close, remember, you have the power to make a difference. Take a minute to read this quote. I think it perfectly sums up our learning. Now that we've completed our time together, what will you take away? What best practices, what ideas, and perhaps one of those problems of the week? Take a second to decide. What are you going to utilize immediately? I hope you've enjoyed our time together. Remember, you have the power to make an impact in the math classroom. Please remember to embed those real-world learning experiences in your everyday lessons and actively support critical thinking and problem solving. And to share our why here at Canyon Professional Development, we are here to empower, educate, and inspire our community so that you can take action to fulfill your purpose and serve others. Have a wonderful day.